We find our cues from the sun and the moon, from each parent and caregiver. We find our place in this great turning planet by turning to one another. Generation to generation, we awake to the dawn and fall asleep at the evening's end. Our life's journey is part of something greater, something simple, something divine. A flame cannot be lit without a spark, a life cannot begin without air, and we cannot begin to find ourselves without love. May we reach out to one another. May we offer love and nurturing care. May we join together in celebration of the interdependence of our lives together. In this spirit, let us worship together. Those words by the Reverend Elizabeth Mount. And I think the soul singer is going to come forward and lead us in hymn number 357 in the great book, Bright Morning Stars. Would you rise for the hymn and for the chalice lighting and doxology to follow? Would our chalice lighters come forward, please, and lead us in the words which are printed in your order of service.
Let this flame be a symbol to us of the wholeness we seek.
Its brightness dispelling gloom, lighting a path to faith and hope.
Its glow reminding us of the sacred bonds that link us to all living things.
Its radiance calling us to cast the light of freedom, justice, and peace upon all the world. seated. Good morning, and welcome to First Parish Church on this glorious, sun-filled day. My name is the Reverend Susan Milner, and I am honored to serve as interim minister to this congregation. My pronouns are she, hers, and her. We gratefully acknowledge the Patuxet Wampanoag people on whose ancestral lands we gather today. We commit to support and honor their history and their culture. We are just so glad to have all of you here today, whether you're a member, a friend, a newcomer, a second-time visitor, whether you are here in the room with us or whether you are online. We are just so glad that you can be with us. If you are here in the building, you are invited to stay for a coffee hour, which is through this door and down at that end of the building. And while you're there, if you are new, if you will take one of the red mugs, then we'll know that you're new and we'll make a particular effort to speak to you, although it seems there's never any lack of conversation in that room when I'm there. I have one announcement, which I've got to just turn around again. Yep, there it is. Next Sunday, May 18th, the religious education children will be participating in a fundraising walk to benefit the Indigenous Peoples Scholarship Fund. I said we're committed to supporting their culture, and that's one of the ways we do it. The kids will be collecting pledges during coffee hour today and next week. Please, this is my addition to that. Please support them in this. And then just on a final word before we sing our children out, let me just say congratulations to First Parish Church for calling your next settled minister, Dara Bryant. Well done. And now if someone will start us, we will sing Go Now in Peace.
Good morning. I'm Lois Wood. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm honored to be worship associate for Reverend Susan. Probably my last time while you're here, which is kind of bittersweet. Today's reading is Mother Root by Cherokee poet Mary Lou Awiakta. Creation often needs two hearts, one to root and one to flower, one to sustain in time of drought and holds fast against winds of pain, the fragile bloom that in the glory of its hour affirms a heart unsung, unseen.
Let me invite you into a spirit of prayer, attention, intention, meditation. These words from Linda Hart. From where have we come? This breath, these fingers, a heart that opens and closes, opens and closes. What is it that has made this body, feet and legs, hair and teeth? We come into consciousness in the middle of the story, The world in its vast life reaches far before we knew and grasps at the future we cannot see. And here we are, living these days for better or worse. Whatever acts of chance occurred to bring us to birth, whatever happenstance laid this particular path for our lives, in these moments of calm and stillness, let our hearts open in gratitude for the gifts that can be found along the way, for love given sweet and free, for the peace of the morning and the warm colors of the sunset, for the grace of companions and moments of ongoing birth as our hearts are renewed, and for those who have offered us the gift of mothering, no matter their age or gender, those who have tended and cared, who have offered support and comfort, who have companioned us, those who have given us life by birth or by their presence in our lives. Recognizing the grief that often comes with such memories on such a day as this, let us open in compassion for our broken hearts, for lost mothers, mothers who could not love us as we needed, mothers who abandoned us, and especially for those whose longing for children was never met. In the stillness of these moments, I invite you, in the silence, to speak in your minds the names of those who have given you life, who have companioned you and nurtured you, whoever they are to you by blood or not, who are held in your heart this day. Let us enter into the silence. May our hopes and dreams take flight on the wings of love. Amen, and blessed be. One of the honors of serving a congregation, like this, is reflecting almost every time I come into this room on the generations, nearly 400 years of generations of people who have nurtured this community, who have kept this faith tradition alive and its antecedent alive so that it would be here for people when they need it, to be inspired by, to be comforted by, to be challenged by. And I think particularly of all the people, all the women who may not appear in the history of the church, but who tended place and people and children. And it seems like the perfect day to commit to keeping this faith here for years and generations to come, which is what we try to do with the ministries of this congregation. Would you support them as generously as you can? The morning offering will now be gratefully received.
The second reading is from In Search of Our Mothers' Gardens by African-American writer Alice Walker. In the late 1920s, my mother ran away from home to marry my father. Marriage, if not running away, was expected of 17-year-old girls. By the time she was 20, she had 2 children and was pregnant with the third. 5 years later, I was born. 5 children later, I was born. And this is how I came to know my mother. She seemed a large, soft, loving-eyed woman who was rarely impatient in our home. Her quick, violent temper was on view only a few times a year, when she battled with the white landlord who had the misfortune to suggest to her that children did not need to go to school. She made the clothes we wore, even my brother's overalls. She made all the towels and sheets we used. She spent the summers canning vegetables and fruits. She spent the winter evenings making quilts, enough to cover all our beds. During the working day, she labored beside, not behind, my father in the fields. There was never a moment for her to sit down undisturbed to unravel her own private thoughts. But when, you will ask, did my overworked mother have time to know or care about feeding the creative spark? The answer is so simple that many of us have spent years discovering it. We have constantly looked high when we should have looked high and low.
To reach my grandmother, you had to walk through her garden. She lived with my aunt, whose old frame house in Knoxville, Tennessee, called for visitors to enter on a path through the flower beds. From March through October, something always bloomed: tulips, snapdragons, zinnias, roses, chrysanthemums. In that garden, it was easy to feel a sense of mystery or even puzzling. How could someone create this riot of color from the Tennessee soil? Did the flowers grow from a vision nursed in the dark of night or over a flower kneading board in the kitchen? How could my little grandmother make it happen? Part Irish, part Scots, Jessie Lee showed an apparent calm and, paradoxically, a temper that flared openly. She gave birth to 10 children, lost 2 in infancy, and raised 8 from the first decade of the 20th century through the Great Depression. Her children treated Mama with respect, and they counted her a woman to be reckoned with. When my mother told Jessie Lee that she and my father had eloped to be married by a justice of the peace, it did not go well. A few days later, they were in church being married by a minister. For all her apparent ability, my grandmother coped with a challenging life. My grandfather was a sometimes employed house painter by trade, a landscape painter, and opera lover by passion. He spent long hours in the attic, away from the family, working on his canvases, listening to arias, and leaving my grandmother to care for their life. As he nourished his spirit, Jessie Lee struggled to feed and care for 8 children in hard times. She made their clothes, sewed their clothes, cut their hair, grew and canned much of their food, and managed to get them through high school. Despite some surface similarities, my grandmother's life was not like that of Alice Walker's Black mother, who lived with extreme poverty, physical abuse, and the grind of blatant, brutal racism. In her essay, Our Mother's Garden, Walker says it frankly: Black women have been the mules of our society, dumped with everything no one else wanted to do, looked down on as less than fully human, and crushed by indifference and cruelty. More than raging about what happened to her foremothers, Walker mourns the losses, creativity that was squelched by impossible hardship, and artistic spirits that rarely had the opportunity to find full expression or be shared widely. Did you have a genius of a great-great-great-grandmother who was required to bake biscuits when she cried out in her soul to paint watercolors of sunsets or the rain falling on the green and peaceful pasture lands, Walker writes? Or was her body broken and forced to bear 8, 10, 15, 20 children when her one joy was the thought of modeling heroic figures of rebellion in stone or clay? Many of you will remember Virginia Woolf's classic small volume, A Room of Her Own, in which she argues that women seldom ended up ranking among the historically great writers because they didn't have rooms, both literal and mental, as well as the time and attention to devote to art. They didn't have a room of their own. And it was an obvious truth on one level, yet is it the whole truth? What are we to make, says Alice Walker, of colonial poet Phyllis Wheatley, an enslaved woman who owned not even herself, yet managed to leave a legacy of poems that shimmer with grace as well as struggle, and that many of us read when studying literature. In white Euro-Western culture, we consider art as something that embodies greatness, yet we believe there's not a lot of greatness to go around. There's an assumption of scarcity built into our very idea of it. Insight that passes through the ages becomes trite to the critic rather than wise. After Picasso, who can be a cubist? After Monet, what can anyone really do with Impressionism? Yet there is, or probably was until about January, a quilt hanging in the Smithsonian Institute, portraying a unique, fanciful figure of the crucifixion of Christ. It's considered rare and priceless, and although made from bits and pieces of worthless rags, it emerged from a powerful imagination. The identification read that it was made by an anonymous Black woman in Alabama 100+ years ago. Even while living on the edge, foremothers held on to that creative urge. In their consuming domestic work, they found a way to make real the beauty that they imagined and perceived and gloried in. In her poem, which Lois shared with you, Appalachian and Cherokee poet Marilu Awiakta glimpses what they required. Creation needs two hearts, one to take root and one to flower, one to sustain in times of drought and hold fast against the winds of pain, the fragile bloom that in the glory of its hour affirms a heart unseen, unsung. A heart unsung and unseen. On Mother's Day, we are called by the whole culture to the gratitude that so many have, rightly, toward birth and adoptive mothers. But not everyone receives such legacies from a mother who might not have been there or might have been struggling deeply herself. Mothers can abandon children or neglect them. My own relationship with my often silent mother was not easy, but so many women over my life have extended acceptance and care and counsel, sometimes inside, sometimes beyond the ties of blood kinship. My Aunt Mary, whom I love for her gentle way, my older sister, who literally rescued me once, my third grade teacher who lifted up my ability, my friend Rita, a friend from college who taught me that women can be both strong and warm. The late Reverend Betty Baker, minister of religious education and wise woman who opened her arms to a novice minister and shared her insights. On this day, we acknowledge the contribution not only of those the world calls mothers, precious though they can be, but all those people of any gender who have helped to make us whole by nurturing and caring for us and challenging us. When it comes to mothers in families or families of choice, let us celebrate whatever made them stitch their creativity into time. Alice Walker's mother worked in the fields of a sharecropper. to feed her family. She gave her genius daughter everything she could. But one thing that touched Alice Walker very deeply was that her mother honored beauty and creativity. She wrote, "Before she left home for the fields, she watered her flowers, chopped up the grass, and laid out new beds. When she returned from the field, she might divide clumps of bulbs, dig a cold pit, uproot and replant roses, or prune branches from her taller bushes or trees until night came and it was too dark to see. Whatever she planted grew as if by magic, and her fame as a grower of flowers spread over 3 counties. My own mother, Stella, Jessie Lee's daughter, grew nothing in the ground, but she could make pies that people dream about. My father's co-workers at the Southern Railway begged him to bring her pies to work. They offered to pay for them. At every family reunion, it was a given that Stella would contribute her chocolate pie. And on Saturdays, my mother sometimes threw away 2 flawed pie crusts before using the third. A crack here, 2 brown there to pair with the perfect filling. My mother would not allow the imperfections, which seemed to me for years a problem. Until I read Alice Walker, it never occurred to me that she was an artist. Otherwise unseen and unsung, with a heart lost to a life of disappointments. Who, after all, would fault Rembrandt for starting over 3 times? If we find his first attempts, we hang them in museums as studies. Our mothers and foremothers knew that creation depends on 2 hearts, one to take root and one to flower. And in struggling with their own lives, the women who came before us, who collectively raised us and sometimes saved us, gave us root. And in their imagination and what they gave us that way, they and we flowered. They didn't have the means to support their families financially. Most of the generations could not vote. They did not have respect as full human beings, and they did not have choice over how many children they had or when their bodies were worn out and had borne enough. Today, I'm convinced that most of them would want those things for us. And it is for the sake of all the foremothers and the children to come after us that we must hold on to or sadly regain the freedoms that make us free, that give us agency in our lives. My mother would be dismayed by a daughter who pulls a pre-made crust from the freezer. Jessie Lee would be disappointed in a granddaughter who could not sew anything or grow a plant. And if she saw that granddaughter officiate a wedding in church, she would probably think that the marriage was not valid. There is continuity, though. Fridays and Saturdays sometimes find me at the computer muttering to myself, hitting the delete key on a section of a sermon and starting again. When my mother died, she lay in the same bed in which I had lain in childhood as she nursed me through illnesses. It was the bed where she made tents for the vaporizer, brought me popsicles when the measles invaded my mouth, tended me like a garden. And in the beauty of April, with azaleas in dogwoods at peak, I stood beside this woman who brought me into the world as she left it. It was on that day that gardens and pie crust grew more dear to me. It was on that day that I began consciously to tend my mother's garden and the garden of her mother before her and all the mothers before all of us. Let us tend the plantings of the soul backwards and forwards in time through the circle of life until the beginning and the end meet. May all our foremothers and forebears, the wise ones who tended the gardens of the Spirit, those who created little slips of paradise in the tumble of this world, blessed be. And in the Spirit, that the word God can represent so many things, from the goddess to the spirit to the earth. Please rise and join in singing number 23, Bring Many Names. please, to extinguish the chalice. And would you join with me, please, in the words for that which are printed in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Words of benediction are adapted from Kathleen McTee. The world calls us to imagine ourselves as essential to this engaged holiness, bringing forth what is ours to give of creation and strength toward mending the broken world. So may it be. Amen. Appreciation for our guest musician this morning, because